want you to close your eyes for a moment. Unless you are driving or operating machinery, of course.
Yeah, please keep your eyes open if you're driving.
Right, safety first. But if you can, I really want you to paint a picture in your mind of the ultimate cosmological event. But we are not talking about the Big Bang of our own universe today.
No, not at all.
We are looking at a world that is just shrouded in this endless, suffocating, monochromatic gray fog. Just a reality completely dominated by these massive, craggy arch trees made of solid stone, and they act as the literal pillars holding up the sky.
It is a profound image.
And ruling over this completely silent expanse are these terrifying, immortal, everlasting dragons. In a world where absolutely nothing happens, nothing changes, the universe is just, well, it's a flat line.
Utter stasis.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And then, suddenly, deep underground, down within the roots of one of those stone trees, a single spark ignites. And that one microscopic spark fundamentally rewrites the physical laws of this entire reality forever.
It is the absolute defining rupture in their timeline.
It really is. But before we get into the sheer terrifying mechanics of how an entire universe runs on fire, I have to mention that today's special edition deep dive is brought to you by The Haunted Podcast, hosted by Gary and Emily.
Such a great show.
It really is. If you have any interest at all in like the mysterious, the unsettling, or just those profoundly fascinating dark corners of history and folklore, you absolutely must check them out.
Yeah, they do incredible work over there. The way they break down the psychology of the unsettling is just highly recommended for anyone who enjoys what we do here.
Definitely. They explore the kind of atmospheric, eerie stories that just linger in your mind long after you finish listening. So go find The Haunted Podcast with Gary and Emily, give them a listen, and subscribe to their show.
You won't regret it.
So, returning to that spark in the fog, today we are embarking on a deep dive into one of the most fascinating cosmological, historical, and thermodynamic anomalies on record.
Yeah.
We're talking about the first flame and the physical geographical structure built to house it, the kiln of the first flame.
Right.
We are going to treat this universe, the reality you might know from the historical records of the Dark Souls era, as a serious subject of scientific and sociological study. We are stripping away all the myth, all that religious propaganda pushed by the gods, and looking purely at the mechanics of this world.
Because when you look at the raw archaeological and geological data of this universe, it really demands serious analysis. I mean, the mechanics of this reality are bizarre, sure, but they possess this incredibly internal, ruthless logic.
They really do.
Our mission today is to understand how a civilization can build an entire cosmological infrastructure around a dying fire, and, well, the horrific lengths that they will go to in order to keep it burning.
Let's start at the absolute beginning, back in that world of gray fog. The historical archives refer to this period as the Age of Ancients. Can you set the historical stage for us? Like, what does the world actually look like before that first spark of fire? Because you read these accounts, and it sounds less like a planet and more like a sensory deprivation tank.
That is a very accurate way to put it. If we look at the geological bedrock of this universe, the Age of Ancients is a period defined by a state of perfect static equilibrium.
Right.
The archaeological records depict a world totally devoid of any active energy transfer. You have the endless fog, the colossal arch trees, and the everlasting dragons. The defining characteristic of this era is the absolute absence of what the ancients called disparity.
Disparity.
Exactly. There was no life, but crucially, there was also no death.
Okay, hold on. I want to push back on something here, or at least clarify it. Because in previous discussions about this era, the term zero-point energy gets thrown around a lot by researchers.
Yes, it does.
But my understanding of zero-point energy, at least in a quantum mechanical sense, implies there is still a baseline fluctuating energy even in a vacuum. If this world has no heat, no movement, no disparity at all, are we talking about absolute zero? Like, how do dragons even fly if there is no metabolic energy expenditure?
That is a very necessary correction, actually. Calling it zero-point energy is a huge misnomer. It's often used by modern historians who are just trying to awkwardly map our physics onto their reality.
Right, which doesn't really work.
No, it doesn't. It is not a quantum vacuum fluctuating with potential energy. It is much better understood as a reality that simply lacks the very dimension of change.
Wow. Lacks the dimension of change entirely.
Yes. The dragons themselves were not alive in any biological sense that requires, say, ATP or cellular metabolism.
They were just rocks, basically.
Well, they were mineralistic beings. They possessed stone scales. They did not age. They did not reproduce. They did not consume.
Okay, but the flying.
Their flight might not have been aerodynamic lift fueled by muscle mass at all. It was likely a manipulation of magnetic or gravitational constants that existed before the introduction of thermodynamics. Time, as a measurable sequence of decaying or changing events, simply did not exist.
It is just a perfectly still, eternal portrait. Nothing decays, but nothing grows. So into this terrifyingly still portrait, the historical records tell us that deep underground, the first flame spontaneously appears.
The advent of fire.
Right. And the texts say it brought this concept of disparity. But how does a literal physical fire rewrite the fundamental laws of physics for a whole universe?
From a scientific perspective, we really have to view this disparity as the sudden, violent introduction of the second law of thermodynamics.
Entropy?
Exactly, entropy. The first flame didn't just bring literal combustion, it acted as a cosmological catalyst that split this uniform reality into binary opposites.
It fractured everything.
Yes. By introducing a localized source of intense heat, the universe suddenly had to accommodate the concept of cold in the places where the heat could not reach. By casting light, it created shadows.
And by introducing a finite energy source that burns and eventually fades, it introduces the concept of a timeline, like mortality.
Precisely. For the first time in the history of this cosmos, a clock started ticking. The universe went from a static portrait to a dynamic, degrading system.
It's terrifying when you think about it like that.
It really is. And the introduction of this thermodynamic energy catalyzed the emergence of humanoid beings from the dark. They were drawn to this localized heat source, and near the first flame, they discovered incredibly dense, tangible manifestations of this new energy.
The Lord's souls.
Right, the Lord's souls.
Since you know this historical period, you already know who claimed these. We have Gravlord Nito taking the soul of death.
Which is essentially the embodiment of entropy.
Exactly. Then the Witch of Izalith claiming life and fire. Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, claiming the ultimate soul of radiant energy. And of course, the furtive pygmy finding the dark soul, representing humanity in shadow.
The whole specter of disparity.
Right. And we know they use these energetic batteries to overthrow the stone dragons and build their golden age of fire. But I don't really want to recount the war today. I want to look at the central, glaring flaw in their new society.
Yes, the thermodynamic nightmare.
Yeah. Because a fire cannot burn forever without fuel. The age of fire is entirely dependent on the first flame, and that flame is subject to the very laws of entropy it brought into existence.
Yeah, it has to fade.
Right. It begins to fade. The lights start going out. So if the Age of Ancients was, say, a perfectly sealed room temperature vault, the first flame is like someone throwing a lit match into it.
That's a good analogy.
Suddenly you have energy, you have heat, but you also have a clock ticking down because that match absolutely needs fuel to keep going.
And they were running out of fuel.
Right. So to stave off the dark, Gwyn and his civilization construct this massive facility to house and feed this fire. Let's talk about the physical location of the ultimate sacrifice. Let's talk about the kiln of the first flame.
The physical geography and architecture of the kiln are just profound. If we study the spatial coordinates based on archaeological digs, it is located impossibly deep underground.
Way beneath the surface.
Yes, resting inside the massive, hollowed-out stump of one of those petrified arch trees from the previous era.
Which is such a massive flex by Gwyn, right? I mean, taking the literal symbol of the immortal, unchanging era of the dragons, hollowing it out, and turning it into a furnace for his new age.
It is the ultimate architectural statement of dominance.
Yeah. But it's not just a cave. When you look at the schematics, it is a colossal, meticulously constructed coliseum.
It is shaped like a literal kiln. I mean, an industrial oven used for firing pottery or smelting, but scaled up to an incomprehensible size.
Just massive.
The engineering required to build a thermal shield capable of housing the foundational energy of the universe is staggering. And the sociological details are etched right into the stone.
Right, the carvings.
Yeah, despite being melted into slag in many places, the surviving pillars feature these intricate, blossoming flower motifs.
Oh, wow.
In Gwyn's civilization, these blossoms represented divine protection and the spread of white fire. So it wasn't just a utility room. It was their most sacred cathedral, built to revere and monitor the source of their power.
But getting to this kiln, this is where I really struggle to wrap my head around the physics of it all. To reach the kiln, you don't just take an elevator down from the surface.
No, it's not a simple descent.
You have to travel from Firelink Shrine down this bizarre, seemingly endless staircase that is completely surrounded by a blinding white, formless expanse. it doesn't physically map onto the underground geography at all.
It defies all standard spatial logic.
It really does. What are you actually experiencing when you walk down those stairs?
What you are experiencing is severe gravitational and temporal dilation. It is essentially a spatial temporal wormhole.
A wormhole.
Yes. You must understand that in this universe, time is not a rigid straight line. The historical records constantly refer to time as stagnant or convoluted.
Right, we see that phrasing a lot.
Because the first flame is the absolute anchor of reality, mass, and energy, it exerts an immense gravitational pull on the very fabric of space-time. The closer you get to the epicenter of the kiln, the more reality distorts.
So it's like,
Yeah.
well, if you drop a bowling ball onto a trampoline, it creates a deep dip.
Yes.
So the first flame is like dropping a neutron star onto that trampoline. As you walk down those stairs, you are descending into the gravity well of the fire, where distance and time just stretch and break down entirely.
That is a very sound way to conceptualize it. It operates very much like the event horizon of a supermassive black hole.
That is terrifying.
It is. And the visual evidence of this temporal breakdown is right in front of you on those stairs. As you descend, you witness these transparent, ethereal spirits of silver knights marching across the expanse.
I always wondered about them. Are they ghosts? Like restless spirits just haunting the stairway?
They are not ghosts in the traditional supernatural sense. They are historical after-images.
Wait, really? Like a recording?
Exactly. They are visual echoes trapped permanently in the space-time distortion. These are the literal recordings of the loyal knights who followed Gwyn down to the kiln millennia ago. You are seeing the light from the past caught in a temporal loop. And the reason they are trapped there is because of the violently energetic event that followed.
The linking.
Yes. When Gwyn finally reached the flame and offered his own soul to it to keep it burning, the resulting explosion of thermal energy was apocalyptic.
The blast was so massive it flash-fried the entire region. It burned the bright silver armor of his knights completely black, turning them into the disembodied black knights who now wander the world as these empty, animated suits of armor.
Yes.
It's like the nuclear shadows found in Hiroshima, but burned into the fabric of time itself.
A horrifying but very accurate parallel. The energy release scarred space-time, leaving those knights wandering the Earth, carrying the ashes of that original explosion permanently fused to their armor.
Okay, this brings up the most terrifying question of this entire deep dive. We keep using the phrase linking the fire. What is the biological and mechanical reality of this process? What does the first flame actually burn? Because clearly it's not running on timber or coal.
No, it certainly isn't. The first flame runs on souls. Souls.
Yes. In this specific universe, a soul is not an abstract religious concept of the self. It is a tangible physical manifestation of energy, consciousness, and disparity.
It's physical fuel.
It is high-octane fuel. To feed the flame and keep the universe's physics operational, you must sacrifice consciousness itself.
So Gwyn is facing this unprecedented energy crisis. The lights are flickering, the cold is creeping back in, and instead of trying to find an alternative, he takes his own phenomenally powerful Lord Soul, steps into the center of the kiln, and acts as the ultimate human battery.
He essentially plugs himself into the cosmological grid.
Wow.
But the aftermath of this linking ritual is unspeakably brutal. The first flame does not just gently siphon energy.
It doesn't just drain you like a phone battery.
No. It violently consumes the soul, drawing out its power, and in the process, it completely incinerates the physical vessel, the body turning it to ash.
So when historians and explorers eventually breach the kiln at the end of the First Age, they don't find the magnificent Lord of Sunlight sitting there.
Far from it. They find a hollowed-out shell of charred ash, blindly swinging a sword, reanimated purely by the tiny, lingering vestige of a soul that hasn't yet been completely digested by the fire.
Yes, he is a battery drained down to the absolute last drop, just lashing out through pure muscle memory.
But this is where I stumble a bit on the logic. If the flame just needs souls to burn, why couldn't Gwyn just corral, say, 100,000 lesser beings, animals, peasants, minor demons, and just toss them into the kiln?
A mass sacrifice.
Yeah. Why did the king himself have to burn? Is it a density issue, like trying to run a nuclear submarine on a massive pile of dry leaves versus dropping in a single rod of weapons-grade uranium?
Your uranium analogy is highly appropriate here. The first flame requires immense energetic density.
Okay.
1 million tiny souls from lesser beings would flash burn in an instant. They lack the mass to sustain a long-term reaction. A Lord's soul, however, possesses the concentrated massive disparity required to sustain the fire for 1,000 years.
So the quality of the fuel matters over the quantity.
Entirely. Furthermore, the very term linking implies a structural integration. The flame must be bonded to a vessel capable of withstanding and channeling the raw throughput of its power.
Right. The vessel has to survive long enough to transmit the energy.
Exactly. A lesser vessel would simply be vaporized instantly, failing to bridge the connection to the universe's energy grid.
Which brings us to the great unspoken horror of this history. Gwyn's sacrifice was monumental, sure, but it was just a Band-Aid.
It was kicking the can down the road.
Exactly. The thermodynamic reality of entropy remained. The fire was going to fade again. And Gwyn, being a master strategist, knew this before he ever stepped into the kiln.
He absolutely did.
This leads us directly into the massive socio-political conspiracy that defines the rest of this world's history.
Indeed. Gwyn knew he would eventually need a successor to serve as the next piece of kindling. And the gods could not afford to sacrifice their entire pantheon one by one.
They'd run out of gods.
Exactly. To facilitate a sustainable system of fuel procurement, Gwyn and his loyalists, specifically entities like the primordial serpent, Frampt left behind an artifact known as the Lord Vessel, securely locked away beneath Firelink's shrine.
And this is where the myth of the chosen undead comes from.
Yes.
If you look at the historical records, there is this pervasive prophecy that a special undead human warrior will rise, overcome impossible trials, ring the bells of awakening, and succeed Gwyn to save the world.
That is the narrative they push, yes.
But when you look at the mechanics, this entire prophecy is a fabricated sociological engineering project created by the ruling class.
It is arguably one of the most brilliant and ruthless political manipulations ever enacted.
It's evil genius.
It really is. The gods recognize that humanity, possessing fragments of the dark soul, represents an enormous untapped reservoir of energy. But humans are also naturally inclined toward the dark, so they are a political threat. By inventing the prophecy of the chosen undead, by telling a human that they have a grand heroic destiny to save the world, the gods successfully weaponize humanity's intrinsic desire for purpose.
You are manipulated into becoming a bounty hunter.
Exactly.
Think about the actual mission given to the undead. They're told to go gather the fragments of the great Lord souls to prove their worth.
Yeah.
And who holds those souls?
All of Gwyn's old problems.
Right. Gravelord Nito, the mutated Witch of Izalith, a fragment given to the traitor dragon Seath, the corrupted four kings of New Lunda. These are all the old rivals, liabilities, or former allies of Gwyn who have grown too powerful or unstable.
Precisely. The undead acts as an unwitting assassin for the state.
Wow.
They traverse a hostile, decaying world, neutralizing the remaining political and physical threats to Gwyn's legacy, and absorbing their massive souls in the process.
And then what?
The undead then deposits this gathered energy into the Lord Vessel. The genius of this system is its dual function. It eliminates the god's enemies, and it operates as a biological centrifuge, artificially inflating the soul density of the undead warrior.
They are enriching the uranium.
Exactly. By the time the undead fills the Lord Vessel and unlocks the door to the kiln, they have proven, through trial by combat, that they contain enough combustible energy to serve as the next log on the fire.
I just want to pause and reflect on how deeply tragic and cynical that is. Imagine you are the person living through this history. You are told you are the hero of destiny.
You believe you are saving everyone.
Yeah. You fight your way through literal, agonizing hellscapes. You battle demons. You slay dragons. You endure the psychological torture of endless death and resurrection.
The toll on the mind is immense.
And your grand prize at the finish line. Your ultimate reward for quote-unquote saving the world is being locked inside a stone oven and burned alive for 1,000 years. All to keep the lights on for a corrupt ruling class that has already abandoned the planet.
It is the ultimate exploitation of the working class, elevated to a cosmic scale.
That is so dark.
The hero is nothing more than highly refined fuel, and the tragedy only compounds when we examine how this ritual evolves over subsequent eras. Because Gwyn's system works. It works so well that this ritual isn't just performed once. It is repeated over and over and over again for thousands of years.
It just becomes a cycle. Let's jump forward in the historical timeline to the era of Lothric. This is ages after Gwyn. The continuous, forced linking of the fire has taken a horrific toll on the actual fabric of reality.
A catastrophic toll.
You can't just keep hitting the reset button on a universe without degrading the hardware.
Right. The universe by the era of Lothric is experiencing extreme spatial and temporal fatigue. The world is literally collapsing in on itself.
We see that in the geography, right?
Yes. If you look at the geographical data from that era, kingdoms from completely different points in time and space are churning together, literally crashing into each other at the base of the kiln.
It's like a tectonic pileup.
Exactly. The Earth is turning into mountains of ash. The repeated violation of the natural thermodynamic cycle, the absolute refusal to let the fire die naturally, has broken the structural integrity of the world.
And the fuel sources are drying up. Finding a single individual with a soul dense enough to match Gwyn has become mathematically impossible. So the ritual has to evolve.
It had to adapt to survive.
To survive the linking process, some groups had to share the immense physical burden. We see groups like the Abyss Watchers, an entire legion of elite warriors whose souls became magically intertwined so they could link the fire as a single collective entity.
Those who successfully link the fire, survive the initial blast, and preserve the age are enshrined in history as Lords of Cinder.
Right.
But from a mechanical perspective, what is equally important for our study are the failures.
The unkindled, the ashen ones. What actually differentiates a Lord of Cinder from an unkindled? Because they both try to link the fire.
Well, an unkindled is an individual from history who bravely attempted to link the fire. They threw themselves into the kiln, just like the prophecy demanded, but they lacked sufficient soul density.
They weren't weapons grade.
Exactly. When they offered themselves, the first flame evaluated their fuel, rejected them, and instantly incinerated them into useless, fireless ash.
Just vaporized.
Completely. They were entirely consumed without successfully resetting the age. They couldn't even sustain a cinder.
But the system gets so desperate, so utterly starved for energy in the era of Lothric, that even these failures are dug up.
It reaches a breaking point.
When the current designated fuel sources, the Lords of Cinder, wake up, look at the state of the world, and refuse to do their jobs, the bells toll. The system literally resurrects the ash of the unkindled to act as enforcers.
To hunt down the AWOL lords and drag them back to their thrones to be burned again.
Which brings us to the ultimate philosophical rebellion against this cyclical nightmare. Let's talk about the twin princes, Lothric and Lorien.
A fascinating case study.
The kingdom of Lothric was not just a political entity. It was a society utterly obsessed with producing the perfect heir to link the fire. They engaged in unspeakable magical eugenics and biological experiments to artificially manufacture a Lord of Cinder.
They treated it like a breeding program for a battery.
And the result of that horrific genetic tampering was Prince Lothric, who was born frail, cursed, and physically incapable of even wielding a sword.
The tragic figure.
His soul had to be intertwined with his elder champion brother Lorien, who was crippled in the process. They were engineered specifically down to their very souls to be the ultimate scientifically perfect fuel for the first flame.
But when the time came, they looked at what it costs.
Yeah.
They looked at their decaying, ash-choked world. They saw the geographic collapse of reality. They witnessed the horrific psychological toll the linking took on previous Lords of Cinder, and they looked at their own cursed, engineered existence.
And they simply said no.
They rejected their historical duty.
They barricaded themselves at the top of their castle, surrounded by angels of the dark, and decided to just let the flame die out naturally. They chose to let the world end.
It is a profound philosophical stance. The princes recognized that prolonging the Age of Fire was no longer an act of salvation. It was an act of unnatural cruelty.
Prolonging the suffering.
Yes. They chose the uncertainty of the abyss over the guaranteed perpetual agony of the flame, and their refusal forces the system's final, most desperate failsafe to activate.
Which leads us to the culmination of history at the Kiln. This is where we encounter the final entity guarding the kiln of the first flame in these later ages, the ultimate literal defender of the fire, the Soul of Cinder.
A truly terrifying entity.
I want to spend some time unpacking what this being actually is, because when you read the combat logs and the historical descriptions, it is not just a monster guarding a gate.
Not at all. The Soul of Cinder is a breathtaking manifestation of historical memory.
What do you mean by that?
It is not a single person. It is a literal amalgamation, a composite entity of every single lord who has ever successfully linked the fire since the beginning of time.
Every single one.
Yes. Every king, every undead warrior, every pyromancer, every collective group that ever sacrificed themselves to the kiln is bound together inside this one towering suit of charred, melted armor.
And you can see this history and how it behaves, right?
Absolutely.
The combat data is essentially a physical record of the world's history. When historians describe engaging the Soul of Cinder, It doesn't just have one fighting style. It shifts tactics seamlessly based on who is dominant in the hive mind at that exact second.
It adapts instantly.
One moment it is using a heavy straight sword like a knight. The next it backs up and casts its advanced soul sorceries. Then it's throwing lightning miracles. Then it's using pyromancy. And then it's flipping through the air with a curved sword.
It is literally cycling through the embedded muscle memory of thousands of past heroes.
It is the embodiment of the Age of Fire fighting for its own survival.
Yes. It utilizes the entire accumulated arsenal of humanity and the gods. It is a defense mechanism generated by the first flame itself, using the burn husks of its previous fuels to protect its dying embers.
But the truly chilling aspect of this encounter is what happens when its structural integrity begins to fail.
Right. The second phase.
When the entity is pushed to the absolute brink, it abandons all the accumulated complex tactics of the later ages. It strips away all the layers.
It regresses.
It's like taking a geological core sample of this world's history. If you dig down through the dirt, you find the layer of the sorcerers. You go deeper and find the pyromancers, deeper still to the knights with their heavy swords.
Yeah.
But if you hit the absolute bedrock of this world's history, the very bottom of the core sample, you hit Gwyn.
The foundation of the fire.
Right.
The soul of Cinder reverts entirely to the fighting style of Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight. It abandons magic and agility and resorts to his exact, hyper-aggressive sword swings, his devastating grabs, his leaping strikes.
Because no matter how many thousands of years have passed, no matter how many other billions of souls have been added to the fire, Gwyn's original soul is the cornerstone of the entire paradigm.
It is a haunting realization that at the end of the world, you are basically fighting the ghost of the first king, desperately trying to keep his dying dream alive through pure, mindless instinct.
It really is. But once the soul of Cinder is finally defeated, you reach the flame. You reach the ends of the historical record. The world is buried in mountains of ash. So what are the actual choices presented to whoever finally stands in that kiln at the end of time?
The historical choices recorded at the end of time fall into 4 distinct paths, each representing a profound philosophical decision in the face of cosmic death.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is the most traditional, the path the gods engineered, linking the fire.
Just doing what everyone else did.
Yes, the individual sacrifices themselves, repeating Gwyn's mistake, to prolong a dying, unnatural age for just a little while longer.
But at this point, it's just a pathetic spark, right?
Yeah.
You aren't creating a huge explosion like Gwyn did. You are just kind of sitting down and catching on fire, offering a tiny ember to a world that is already mostly ash.
Exactly. It's a desperate, useless cling to the status quo. The energy return on investment is almost zero.
So what is the second option?
The second path is the end of fire.
Letting it die.
Yes. The individual works with the specialized firekeeper to gently suppress the flame, allowing it to fade naturally without violently snuffing it out.
Like blowing out a candle?
More like letting the wax burn down completely. The world goes entirely dark, returning to a state closer to the Age of Ancients. However, the firekeeper notes that in the far, far distance, tiny flames will one day dance in the darkness again.
It is an acceptance of the natural thermodynamic cycle of death, allowing the universe to rest so that eventual rebirth is possible.
Exactly.
Letting the overgrown, rotting forest burn away completely so new seeds can eventually grow in the nutrient-rich ash. What are the other 2 paths?
The third is the usurpation of fire. This is a highly complex, treacherous political path where the human individual does not feed themselves to the flame, nor do they let it die.
What do they do with it?
Instead, they absorb the first flame into their own physical body, stealing the power of the gods entirely.
Oh, wow.
Instead of fueling the Age of the Gods, they become a Dark Lord, beginning an Age of Dark ruled by hollowed humanity. It is a hostile corporate takeover of reality's power source.
You essentially rip the battery out of the wall and swallow it. And the fourth?
The fourth is the betrayal. It is a cruel, opportunistic choice where the individual goes through the motions of letting the fire die, but at the last moment slays the firekeeper, hoarding the dying embers for themselves.
Wow, just brutal.
Very. They rule over the ashes not as a Dark Lord with a grand vision, but as a petty tyrant of a dead, empty world.
But the tragedy here, the real kicker, when you look at the physics we discussed in the beginning, is the illusion of choice, isn't it?
It is entirely an illusion.
Because the energy is gone.
Yes. The thermodynamic reality cannot be ignored or bypassed by magic. No matter what choice is made, whether the fire is linked, extinguished, usurped, or hoarded, the Age of Fire is fundamentally over.
There's nothing left to save.
No. The kiln is geographically buried under actual mountains of ash from thousands of years of burned souls. The world is exhausted. The fuel is spent. The system has collapsed under the weight of its own unnaturally prolonged existence.
Entropy always wins.
Entropy always wins.
Wow, what a breathtaking journey through the mechanics of a dying universe. To recap, we started with the absolute zero-point stillness of the Age of Ancients, completely shattered by the Big Bang of the first flame, which introduced thermodynamics, entropy, and disparity.
A phenomenal shift in reality.
Then we explored the impossible architecture and the time-bending wormhole reality of the kiln. We uncovered the grand, horrifying political conspiracy of the chosen undead, weaponized as bounty hunters to act as highly enriched fuel for a corrupt ruling class.
A deeply cynical system.
And we analyzed the tragic physics of a universe running completely out of energy, fighting its own inevitable demise through the hive mind muscle memory of the soul of Cinder.
It is a profound study in entropy, sociological manipulation, and the desperate, destructive lengths civilizations will go to in order to preserve their power structures.
It really is, and I think it connects so deeply to all of you listening right now. We all deal with decaying systems in our own lives, whether it's an outdated institution you work for, a toxic relationship that has run its course, a bad habit, or a failing project.
We all face that entropy on a personal level.
Right. You are eventually faced with the exact same choice Prince Lothric faced. Do you keep sacrificing yourself, burning yourself out to maintain a broken, miserable status quo? Or do you have the courage to let the fire fade, embrace the unknown dark, and see what naturally grows from the ashes?
It is the ultimate question of recognizing when a cycle has run its course and having the wisdom to let go.
Absolutely. And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over today. If the first flame brought disparity into the world, if it literally created life and death, light and dark, time and change, what actually happens to the fundamental physics of the universe when that flame completely, utterly dies?
That is the big unknown.
Right. Does the world revert back to the gray, timeless, immortal fog of the everlasting dragons? Or does a brand new, unimaginable fundamental force take over the vacuum? When the universe goes entirely cold, what replaces disparity?
A truly profound question. The physics of a post-disparity universe are entirely theoretical, but terrifying to contemplate.
Something to keep you up at night. Thank you for joining us on this incredible exploration of the first flame. And remember, this special edition deep dive was brought to you by The Haunted Podcast with Gary and Emily.
Check them out.
Yes, if you enjoyed our exploration of the eerie, the mysterious, and the dark mechanics of the unknown today, you will absolutely love what they do over there. Go like, subscribe, and continue your own explorations of the strange and unsettling with them. And until next time, keep looking deeper into the dark.